I haven't told anyone about this. Not really. It's just sat with me for a long time, and I realized keeping it all inside wasn't making it any smaller. There wasn't a specific reason to bring it up, I guess. Just a feeling that putting the pieces somewhere outside my head might help. It started with a pretty normal evening, a crowded bar and a shared excitement over the game. I exchanged a number with someone there, and that was that, or so I thought. The highway was flat. Just endless gray and these fields that looked like someone had ironed them. I kept checking the rearview mirror, which is dumb, I know. It's a habit, especially on long drives, and honestly, I was expecting to see headlights, not following exactly, but present. Kit had said his place was pretty remote, about 1 hour past where my phone lost signal. It had, of course. I remembered the bar. The way he'd leaned in, all easy smiles and asking about my work. He'd mentioned knowing Alma, which was the weird part. I hadn't seen Alma since God. College, a quick, oh, small world, and then he'd moved on. Seemed harmless enough, now. I passed a sign for Birch Creek and felt a prickle on my neck. Kit had mentioned a Birch Creek, but he'd said it was after the turnoff for Oakhaven. And Oakhaven was back there, miles back. I slowed, glanced at the sign again. Birch Creek Road. It wasn't a mistake. Maybe he'd given me bad directions on purpose. Testing me? Some kind of rural hospitality thing? It felt stupid to even think that, but it was less unsettling than the alternative. I pulled over, trying to get a read on things. Just fields. And the quiet. Too quiet. I pulled back onto the highway. Then I saw it. A beat-up, dark green pickup about a quarter-mile back. It hadn't been there a minute ago. It wasn't speeding up, just maintaining distance. I told myself it was just someone going the same way. Probably a local, but it was the same truck. I was sure of it. The dented fender, the faded sticker on the back window. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. The green truck was still there. Same distance. It wasn't aggressive, not tailgating, just present. I started to rationalize it. Maybe this was a route truckers used, and it was just following the same path. It was a long shot, but better than the other thoughts. I was almost to Walt's property, according to the directions. Almost. Then I saw the sign again. Harmony Creek, 7 miles. I'd passed that sign, 10 minutes ago. It didn't make sense. Walt had said to take 32B for another 15 miles after the last town. This felt wrong. I slowed, thinking about turning around, but the thought of backtracking on that empty road I pressed on, figuring maybe the sign was new, or I'd misremembered. As I rounded a bend, there it was, Walt's place, or what I thought was Walt's place. It was a cabin, all right, looked just like he'd described, but there was a car parked out front, a silver sedan, and someone was on the porch, waving. It wasn't Walt. It was Mona. Mona from the bar. What was she doing here? I hadn't even told her I was going. She just knew. I killed the engine, feeling my pulse quicken. This was getting weird. Really weird. She came down the steps, smiling. You made it. Walt's still out back, checking on something with the generator. He asked me to keep an eye out for you. She said it so casually, like this was perfectly normal. I got out of the car, trying to appear calm. Yeah. Hi, Mona. Didn't realize you knew Walt. Oh, we go way back, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Small world, huh? I nodded, but it didn't feel small. It felt arranged, like I'd walked right into something I didn't understand. Maybe Walt wasn't telling me everything. Maybe this was some kind of surprise. But the green truck, the repeated sign, it didn't fit. I figured Walt must have mentioned it to Mona, a last-minute change of plans or something. I really wanted to believe that. Mona was making coffee. Not a big deal, right? Just making coffee. But the way she was doing it, measuring everything out like a chemist. The grinder so quiet it was unsettling. It just felt off. I asked her again about Walt. She said he was around, checking the property lines. Property lines? I thought this was just a weekend getaway. She offered me a mug, and I took it mostly to stop asking questions. It smelled burnt. Then I noticed the photos. They were taped to the inside of the cupboard doors. Not family photos, not vacation shots. Pictures of me, bad ones. Blurry phone pictures taken from a distance, one from outside the diner I stopped at on the way up, a week ago. Another near my apartment building in the city. I hadn't even noticed anyone. "What are these?" I asked, my voice sounding strange even to me. Mona just smiled, a slow, deliberate thing. "Just keeping track. Walt likes to know who's visiting." That's when I heard the truck. Not the green one, but a beat-up pickup, dark blue, pulling up fast, and then shouting, a man's voice yelling my name. It was Ira, the guy who ran the bait shop near the highway. He was waving his arms, pointing at the woods behind the cabin. "Get out, now there's a fire." Mona didn't even flinch. She just kept stirring her coffee. "He gets carried away," she said. "Old man's imagination." But Ira wasn't looking at the woods anymore. He was looking at me, his face white with terror. He started running towards my car, yelling something about a blocked road, a fallen tree. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I just ran. I fumbled with the keys, got the engine started, and slammed the car into reverse, kicking up gravel. I thought maybe Ira knew something about Walt, about this whole setup. Maybe he was the one Walt was expecting. As I peeled out, I saw Mona standing in the doorway, still holding her mug. And she was smiling, a real smile this time. And in her other hand, she had something small and silver, a key, my car key. The tires spun on the gravel for 20 feet before catching. I just drove. I didn't even think. I didn't look back. I drove straight to the nearest state police barracks, which wasn't near. It felt like hours, but it was probably closer to 40 minutes. I told them everything about Mona. The cabin, the photos, the key. The officer, a guy named Walt, kept looking at his notepad, then at me, then back at his notepad. He asked a lot of questions about Mona, where I met her, what she did. I explained about the art fair, how she'd admired my pottery, how she just seemed nice. "And she had a key to your car?" Walt asked slowly. "Yes, she was standing there, smiling, holding it." He ran my plates, my license. Then he asked if I'd reported anything stolen, any recent break-ins. Nothing. He said they'd put out an APB on the car, just in case, but he didn't seem concerned, more like he thought I was stressed, maybe overreacting. He kept talking about how rural that area was, how people could be eccentric. I insisted on filing a formal statement. I wanted something on paper. I even took photos of the photos I'd found in the cabin with my phone, trying to get good angles. Walt said it was a good idea to document everything, but he didn't offer to take the photos himself. He barely glanced at them. A few days later, I got a call. Not from the police, from my bank. Someone had attempted a small transaction on my credit card from a gas station about 20 miles from Mona's cabin. They flagged it as suspicious. I canceled the card, of course, but it felt deliberate, not random, like she was testing something. I started keeping a log, a detailed timeline of everything. Every time I saw a strange car, every time I felt like I was being watched. It felt ridiculous, paranoid even, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something, that this wasn't about a creepy weekend getaway. It was targeted, like she'd known exactly how to get under my skin. And maybe, just maybe, she'd known me longer than I thought. I started going through old photos, checking faces at art fairs, parties, searching for her. I kept replaying that weekend with Mona, trying to find the seam, the moment it shifted. I remembered her asking about my kiln, about how long it took to fire a full load. It seemed harmless enough, just making conversation, but she asked specifically about the timing, about when I usually started the firing process. And she knew I used propane. I'd mentioned it casually, a throwaway line about the cost. Then I remembered seeing a truck, a utility truck, parked down the road a couple of times in the weeks before Mona showed up. I'd assumed it was the phone company, fixing lines after a storm. Rural areas always have downed lines. But now I wondered if it wasn't about the phone lines at all. Maybe they were checking something else, mapping the power grid or something. It sounded crazy even to me. Like a bad movie. I started being obsessive about the security cameras. I had a couple, mostly for deliveries, pointed at the driveway and the back entrance. I reviewed the footage every day. Nothing, just deer, the occasional fox, the mail carrier, but I felt this pressure like someone was watching the cameras, knowing when not to be seen. I even started leaving the radio on, tuned to a talk station, when I went into town, just to create the impression someone was home. I called Kit, a friend from the co-op. He's good with that kind of thing, security systems. He came out and took a look. He said everything was fine, probably just nerves, but he did install a new lock on the back door, a heavy-duty one. He didn't say much, but I could tell he thought I was overreacting. Now, before I agree to any open studio event, any casual invitation, I ask Ned from the hardware store, who has been there forever and knows everyone about the person. Just a simple, "Do you know anything about?" It feels cold. It's cost me a couple of potential sales, a few new contacts, but I can't seem to shake the habit. I tell myself it's professional due diligence, but it's not. It's just checking, and every time I do it, I picture Mona's face, and I wonder what I missed. It was the kind of place that always smelled faintly of stale beer and peanuts, even after they'd cleaned. A neighborhood sports bar mostly. Families came after Little League. People gathered to watch the bigger games on the weekends. I wasn't a regular, but I'd go when my son's team had a win, just to unwind a little. It felt good to be part of that casual celebration, that small-town feeling. The chipped formica of the bar felt cool under my elbows. Friday night, same as usual. Petra was behind the bar, polishing glasses, not really looking at anyone. Good, I didn't want to talk. I just needed a beer and to unwind after practice. Willa was at her piano in the corner, playing that same melancholy tune she always did. It was comfortable. It was quiet. I was thinking about Leo's batting stance, how he's really starting to get the hang of following through when I noticed him. Ephraim, he was sitting a few stools down, nursing a soda, just watching. He'd been at a couple of the games lately, which was nice. He's a good guy, always friendly. A little intense, maybe. I remembered giving him Leo's old jersey, the one that was too small, after the first game. Leo hadn't even wanted to part with it, but I figured someone could use it. Ephraim had been really grateful. He'd said his nephew was a huge fan. That's all. But he was really watching. And then I saw it, stuck to the mirror behind the bar, right next to the dusty beer signs, another one of Leo's baseball cards. The 2022 All-Star. The one with the slightly off-center photo. The one I'd pulled from a pack and laminated myself. I distinctly remember it being in the photo album. I blinked. Probably just a kid stuck it up there. Kids are always running around. I scanned the room, but it didn't look like any kid had been near the mirror. Petra hadn't said anything. Ephraim hadn't moved. It had to be a coincidence. 2 games, 2 times seeing someone connected to Leo at this bar. Maybe Ephraim's nephew had been here. Maybe he'd shown the card around. It was a small town. Things like that happened. Still, I felt off, like a little knot tightening in my chest. I ordered another beer. I finished the beer. The piano was doing some slow, bluesy thing. I tried to focus on the music, on anything but the card, but it was there in my peripheral vision even when I closed my eyes. I told myself it was just a weird prank, some local kid trying to be funny. Leo's card wasn't valuable. Not really, just a rookie year thing. I went to call Loretta, my wife. I needed to hear her voice. No signal. That was odd usually. Even in the back, I could get 1 bar. I tried again, nothing. I figured it was just the bar's bad reception. I'd text her when I got home. When I went to leave Willa, the bartender was wiping down the bar. "Rough night?" she asked without looking up. "Just thinking," I said, and then I saw it. A small folded piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. I hadn't noticed anyone near the car. I unfolded it. It was a picture, not of Leo, of me, standing at his last game taking photos. It wasn't a great picture, blurry, caught mid-stride, but undeniably me. My heart hammered. Prank didn't feel right anymore. This felt deliberate. I looked around the parking lot, empty. I got in the car, locked the doors, and backed out slowly. I decided to take the long way home, avoid Maple Street, just in case. I drove past Ephraim's house. He was outside watering his lawn. He looked up, saw me, and gave a small wave. He was smiling. Too friendly. It felt staged. Maybe he was just being neighborly. Maybe I was reading too much into everything, but as I drove on, I checked my rearview mirror. Ephraim was still standing there, watching me, and he hadn't gone back to watering the lawn. He was just watching. I didn't go home. Not that night. I just kept driving. I needed to think. I needed to be somewhere Ephraim couldn't be. I ended up at Loretta's. She lives far past the highway down a dirt road. It's an old farmhouse surrounded by trees. Loretta and my mom were in a book club together for years, so I'd been there a few times. She always has a spare room. She was surprised to see me, of course. She said I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I told her I was just stressed about work. She didn't push. She offered me coffee and a slice of apple pie. It tasted like my grandmother used to make it. I almost relaxed. Almost. Then, around 10 o'clock, I heard it. A low crunching sound, like someone walking on gravel. Loretta's driveway is gravel. I went to the window, nothing, just the trees swaying in the wind. I figured it was a deer. Loretta said they come right up to the house sometimes. But then I heard it again. Closer. And a car engine. It was slow, like someone circling the property. I told Loretta something wasn't right. She got a little dismissive, saying it was probably just teenagers, but she went to get her shotgun anyway. I peeked through the curtains again. A dark sedan. It was parked at the end of the driveway. Engine idling. I couldn't make out the driver. It wasn't Ephraim's truck, but it felt connected, like he'd sent someone, like he wasn't doing this himself. Maybe it was about Leo. Maybe Leo had enemies, and they were coming after anyone who knew him. Then the headlights went off. The car started backing out, slowly and silently. I felt a coldness creep up my spine. It wasn't leaving, it was repositioning. I grabbed my keys. "Loretta," I said, "I need to go." She looked at me, confused, shotgun in hand. "Now," I said, "just now." I didn't wait for her to answer. I just ran. I drove until I hit the highway, then another hour past that. Just kept going. Finally, I pulled into a motel in Oak Haven. It wasn't much. It smelled like stale smoke and regret, but it was public. I called the police, gave them the address of Loretta's place, and told them about the car. They were polite and said they'd send someone to check it out. I didn't mention the guy, Ephraim. I didn't know why. I just felt weird about it, like bringing him into it would somehow make it worse. The officer on the phone kept asking if I knew anyone who'd want to harm me. A jealous ex, a disgruntled coworker. I kept saying no. It felt like he was trying to fit me into a box I didn't belong in. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the building, every car that passed had me jumping. In the morning, I called Yael. I told her what happened and asked if she could come get me. She was furious and said she was leaving work early. While I waited, I went through my phone. That's when I saw it. A picture message from a number I didn't recognize, sent while I was driving. Just a picture of the motel. My motel. It had to be a mistake. Someone checking in, same car color, same make. It had to be. I started thinking about the jersey, the one I'd given Ephraim's son, Rowan, for his birthday. Maybe it wasn't about me at all. Maybe it was something to do with him, with his family. Maybe I'd stumbled into something I didn't understand, and someone was just scared I'd say something. But the chill, the one I felt when that car reversed, came back, and it wasn't about protecting a secret. It was about finding me. Yael arrived, face tight with worry. I didn't tell her about the picture. Not yet. Yael insisted on driving. She said I was too rattled. I let her. I didn't argue. We didn't talk much either, just the highway hypnosis of those long stretches of blacktop. We ended up at Loretta's, her aunt's place out near Havenwood. Loretta's has always been open, a big house, lots of rooms, always someone coming and going. I figured safety in numbers. It felt wrong, though, like I was bringing something to the safety, not finding it. I kept looking for cars, for that dark sedan. I didn't see it, but I started noticing other things. Vans, white vans mostly, with tinted windows, parked one block over, then two. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Havenwood is close to the distribution center. Lots of deliveries. That's what I told myself. I tried to explain about the photograph to Yael, but it came out jumbled. I left out the part about Ephraim, about Rowan and the jersey. It sounded crazy even to me, trying to piece it together. She just held my hand, told me to rest. I haven't been back to a diner since. Not alone, not even with someone. It's stupid. I know it's just the booths. The way you can be looking right at the window but still feel exposed. Like everyone can see you. We used to stop at those little roadside diners all the time. Yael and I, it was a ritual. Now, if I even drive past one, my chest gets tight. I always check the parking lot. Always. And I always ask Yael to pick the restaurant. Any restaurant, just not a diner. I was doing a lot of driving back then, crisscrossing the country for a sales route that felt less glamorous and more endless. Most days blurred into a cycle of highway diners, gas station coffee, and motel rooms. It wasn't a bad life, just a solitary one, and I found myself talking to just about anyone who offered a few minutes of conversation. That's how I ended up at that rest stop, nursing a beer and watching a baseball game on a dusty TV. The Cardinals were down by 2 in the 7th, bases loaded. I was mostly just enjoying the air conditioning. Honestly, long stretches in the car. You start to appreciate small things. That's when he came over. The same guy from earlier, the one who knew way too much about the farm teams. He didn't ask if I minded him watching with me. He just stood there. He smelled like not exactly metal, more like something around metal. Like a workshop, but cleaner and a little sweet. It was weird, but I figured maybe he worked on cars. Lots of people stop at these places tinkering with their vehicles. He started muttering about the pitcher's windup, something about a hitch in his delivery that was telegraphing the fastball. I didn't catch half of it. "You a scout?" I asked, trying to be friendly. He blinked slowly. No, just observant. He kept watching the game, but his eyes weren't really on the field. They kept flicking to me, then back to the screen. It wasn't rude, not exactly, just assessing. He knew my license plate number by heart. I realized he'd mentioned it when we first spoke, commenting on how common it was. I hadn't thought much of it then. I finished my coffee and figured I should get back on the road. Bia was expecting me for dinner. I said, "Well, good luck to the Cardinals," and started to walk away. "You're heading north, right?" he called after me. I turned. "Yeah. To Allentown? Sales call?" He nodded. A small, tight movement. "Good. Safe travels." It struck me then. He'd asked me about my route yesterday, too. Just a casual question, big trip. And I'd told him Allentown. He must just be a friendly guy who likes to chat with other travelers. A lonely soul, maybe. Still, that smell, and the way he looked at me. It was unsettling. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. Not constantly, but enough to make my neck ache. Every dark sedan, every man with a similar build, it was ridiculous. I told myself I was being paranoid, just a weird couple of interactions with a talkative guy. Still, I took 78 instead of the turnpike. More traffic, but less open road. Less chance of someone, well, keeping pace. I stopped for gas outside reading. I just needed to stretch my legs and get a coffee. The guy at the counter, Fitch, his name tag said, asked if I was heading west. Normal enough question, small town, probably just making conversation. But I hesitated before answering. "Allentown," I said, keeping it clipped. He nodded, handing me my change. Rough stretch of road up ahead, construction. That's when I saw him, across the parking lot, leaning against a pickup, same jacket, same intensity. He wasn't looking at me, not directly. He was looking through me, or at something just beyond. It was the way he held himself, like he was waiting. I practically sprinted back to the car, coffee sloshing over my hand. I checked my gas cap, triple-checked the oil, anything to avoid driving past him. When I finally pulled out, he was gone. I told myself he'd just been filling up his own tank. A coincidence, a really unsettling coincidence, but still. Then I remembered the license plate. Last time I'd seen him, he'd been parked near the coffee shop. I'd subconsciously registered it. I pulled out my phone, ran the plate through one of those online databases. It came back registered to a Rand Halverson, address in York, which York is right off 78. The highway I didn't take. He knew I wasn't taking the turnpike. He knew I thought I was being clever. A coldness settled in my stomach. It wasn't just a chatty guy. It wasn't loneliness. It was something else. I kept driving. Just driving. I needed to put miles between myself and Rand. I called BA, my wife, just to hear her voice, I guess. She was in a meeting and left a voicemail asking if everything was okay. I didn't mention him. I didn't want to scare her. It felt ridiculous to explain. It was a weird feeling, a guy asking too many questions. I told her I'd be home late, probably after 12 a.m. I was aiming for the Harrisburg exit, then 81 North. Another detour. I checked my mirror again. Nothing. But I was starting to feel like I was seeing him everywhere. Phantom headlights. Then I saw it. A flash of blue, not a car, a uniformed state trooper. He was pulled over on the shoulder, approximately 1/4 mile back, and he was walking towards me. Slow, deliberate. I hadn't been speeding. There was no reason to be pulled over. Then I saw him. Rand, standing next to the trooper, talking and pointing at my car. My gut twisted. It couldn't be. He'd reported me. For what? Being suspicious. It was insane. I started to slow, preparing to pull over. The trooper started waving me on, waving me through. Rand was still there, watching me pass. But the trooper, he gave me this look. Not angry, not even accusing, just knowing. Like he already knew everything. I floored it. I didn't even glance in the mirror. I just kept going. The Harrisburg exit blurred past. I didn't take it. I kept driving north on 81. I needed to call Bay again, but my hands were shaking too much to even hold the phone. I pulled into a Pilot just outside of Carlisle. I needed coffee, and I needed to think, and I needed to talk to someone who wouldn't look at me like I was losing it. I called Connie. She used to work at the library back home. We weren't friends exactly, more like friendly acquaintances. We'd chat when I came in, mostly about books, but she always seemed to know everything about everyone. Maybe that's why I called. "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's this guy. He keeps showing up. It's weird. And a state trooper seems to be involved somehow." I told her about Rand, about the parking lots, about the way he just knew where I was headed. Connie listened, which was more than I expected. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said, "Carlisle? You're going to Carlisle? That's where Ada lives now." Ada. My grandmother's neighbor. Old Ada Bellwether. She'd always been intense. She'd always asked a lot of questions, but she was ancient. What could she possibly have to do with this? "Yeah," I said, "I'm heading to see my Aunt Nell. It's just a visit." Ada moved there about 6 months ago, Connie said slowly. She's involved in genealogical research, really deep into it. She's been asking around about people with connections to the old families in the area. "You said this man, Rand? Did Ada mention him?" I remembered him now standing in Ada's garden once, years ago, helping her with something. I'd barely registered him. Just a man in a jacket. He'd smiled, a quick polite thing, and I'd thought nothing of it. I started recording everything. Every time I stopped, every time I saw a car that looked remotely familiar, I wanted something concrete to show the police, but the videos were just empty. Blurry images of gas stations and highway, nothing that proved anything. And then my phone started glitching, the files corrupted, just gone. Connie said she'd look into it. But I felt a coldness settle over me. It wasn't about Nell or Carlisle. It was about something else entirely, something I hadn't even noticed happening for a long, long time. It's funny, the things you forget, or maybe not forget, exactly, just relegate them to a different part of the brain. I hadn't thought about Ada in years, not really. Connie brought her up, connecting her to him. It felt like she'd unlocked a box I didn't know I'd closed, a box full of dust and old photographs. I remember helping Ada in her garden, years ago. Before everything, she was cataloging plants, local varieties, things like that. I was just being polite. Rand, my ex, was working late, and I'd offered to pop over and keep her company. She had a guest then, too, a quiet man, always taking notes. That was him, Fitch. I kept replaying it. The way he'd look up when I spoke, not at me, just assessing, like I was a specimen. I thought he was just interested in the plants, or Ada's research, local history, that's what she called it. But now, after Carlisle, I moved. Different state, new job. I tried to put it all behind me, but I started checking rearview mirrors, not constantly, not like a maniac, just more often, and I started noticing faces, not necessarily his face, but faces that seemed to linger a beat too long. I changed my route to work too, took back streets instead of the highway. It wasn't fear exactly. It was a feeling of being observed, like a fly under a microscope. I still do that, take the back streets. Even now, even though it adds 20 minutes to my commute, it's just easier. The highway feels too open, too exposed, and sometimes when a car stays behind me for too long, I count the seconds between lane changes, just to be sure.